First, I think I fed myself a lot of BS, that I was in an echo chamber. I think a lot of leaders are. We start to listen to our own BS and believe it, and people around us will encourage that behavior. And by the way, I don't know whether you looked at or paid attention to my inability to be self-aware and my inability to distinguish the blind spots that I had killed me as a lawyer. I lost my ability to practice law. I went to prison for 5.5 years. So my BS destroyed my professional career and about cost me my family. So I spent 5.5 years in prison, and I guarantee you, as much as I dislike the experience, it probably saved my life.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey entrepreneurs, today we're sitting down with Paul Glover. He's the No B.S. speaker. We're going to jump right into that. He's also the author of a book called WorkQuake. We all know that there's something brewing in the workforce here in America for entrepreneurs that we really got to get our hands on. And he works with leaders and companies across the globe, helping them grow to $1 billion and more through his history of 30 years as a leadership coach and speaker. Paul, welcome to the episode. My first question right off the bat is, why No B.S. speaker? Why is that part of your title?
First, it's a part of who I am. I've eliminated as much BS out of my life and out of my performance as a coach as possible because I think it serves no purpose. And those are my coaching process, and I need to have that type of relationship. Otherwise, my coaching is very ineffective. So I approach that from a direct, honest, let's get down to the real issues that need to be addressed so that your leadership skills can be improved, so that your team can be improved. I really believe that coaching is all about helping a leader to develop, but also helping that leader pass that development along to their team. Post-pandemic, a high-performance work team is the only way that the companies and entrepreneurs are going to survive. And developing that requires that you have a high-performing leader.
Paul, many people have a staple about who they are that's developed from a pain point. And I'm wondering, this staple about no BS, where that came from for you. Was there someone in your life who fed you BS that may have disappointed you, or something that this is a reaction to for you that you have made part of who you are?
Sure. First, I think I fed myself a lot of BS, that I was in an echo chamber. I think a lot of leaders are. We start to listen to our own BS and believe it, and people around us will encourage that behavior. And by the way, I don't know whether you looked at or paid attention to my inability to be self-aware and my inability to distinguish the blind spots that I had killed me as a lawyer. I lost my ability to practice law. I went to prison for 5.5 years. So my BS destroyed my professional career and about cost me my family. So I spent 5.5 years in prison, and I guarantee you, as much as I dislike the experience, it probably saved my life. And second, it changed who I am and how I approached myself, but also others. It was transformative. And by the way, I'm not easily transformed. I really like me. And I was enjoying my life as a person who was basically, I tell people I was a bad guy wannabe. And I, because of my law practice, I hung around with real bad guys. And they were very much aware of my blind spots and my triggers and absolutely took advantage of them to their benefit. And I believe that a lot of leaders are in that echo chamber, surrounded by manipulators and sycophants that will take advantage of them and destroy them and their organizations given the opportunity. That's why no BS. And when I step into that relationship as a coach, that's my approach. By the way, I tell people there are a lot of leaders not ready for that approach. And I'm okay with that. The most difficult person for me to coach is someone who's been very successful and never failed. It is failure that allows you the opportunity to review, self-reflect, and change. I don't believe you can evolve and hit your full potential without that. And yet, convincing leaders who have never failed that they need to have that self-reflective relationship with someone, and it's very difficult for them to do so, they can have it with me. Because I get to tell them, I don't know what you've done in your life that you look at as failure, but going to prison for 5.5 years, losing the career that I loved as a lawyer, and nearly losing my family, it isn't going to be worse than that. So let's set the baseline and work from there. It's worked for me and for those in my coaching program. By the way, 80% of all people referred to me as leaders don't do work with me. They're not ready. I'll give you the last tagline. I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much air with this answer, but I asked a client of mine to do a referral, and he said, absolutely. I said, I know you need to tell me what it is. And he said, Paul is an acquired taste, like cyanide. And I said, all right, that's a good one, but we're not going to use that one. He said, no, let me give you the one I'm going to use. Paul is like a Sherpa. He will guide you to the mountaintop, but he will not carry your pack. That's coaching for me.
Thanks for sharing that part of your story that includes having been in prison. I'm curious how that changed you. That obviously, it sounds like, was a bottoming out for you with a number of things that you had said you lost between your family and the career that you enjoyed. And can you take us through how that 5.5 years you turned from you lost 5.5 years to you evolved over the course of that 5.5 years to come out better on the other side?
Yes. Let me tell you that I spent the first 2 years of my incarceration doing revenge. I was going to put everybody who had crossed me and caused me to go to prison and destroyed my career, I was going to get even. 2 years. And at that time, I came to the realization, because I started to self-reflect. And like I said, terrible experience, prison. I don't recommend anyone do it. But if you are willing to take that time and start to do something with it constructively, and I did, and I started to self-reflect. And the more I entered into that concept of reflection, the more I realized that I put myself in prison. That it was my blind spots and my triggers that caused me to behave a certain way. And I came up with a concept that I now use in my coaching. I'll explain it briefly. I read about the medieval fool. When we think about the medieval fool, that's the person, the man, who sits at the throne of the base of the throne of the king. And he's dressed up in motley clothes, and he jumps up and he capers about and he sings a song and tells a joke. And everyone believes that the fool was an entertainer. That was not the purpose of the fool. The king was ordained by divine. God had made him king. Anyone who challenged the king challenged God. And if you did that, you committed the crime of heresy and you get your head cut off. But everybody knew that even though God was infallible, the king was not. How are we going to allow the king to hear they were making a bad choice, a bad decision, or engaged in bad behavior? The fool. Because the fool was looked at as being crazy, the rule did not apply to them about facing the king, telling the king that they were making a mistake. And that safety, that psychological safety that the fool had, made him the king's trusted advisor. And when I read that story, that definition, it resonated so strongly with me about that's what I was going to become. I was going to become the fool for leaders. But I also realized I needed a fool. Because even though self-reflection is important, let's be realistic. Often it's like we're looking in a mirror. And unfortunately, we see a lot of what we want to see rather than the true reflection. Mirrors are not perfect. So I needed a fool. And I started off with the person who I'd hurt the most, and that was my wife. And when she came to visit me, and my wife came to visit me once a month, driving 5.5 hours from Chicago to spend a day and a half with me in a crowded visiting room once a month for 5.5 years. And she stayed with me. My family remarkably stayed with me. And I had the conversation with her in the visiting room about what I wanted, what I was looking for. I wanted her to tell me the truth about me as she saw me. And she initially said no. She said, I know you so well, and I know how adversely you're going to react to what I have to say to you. And I had to convince her to do this. Once a month, when she would come down, we would have our visit for a day and a half. The last hour, she got to unload. Tough experience, by the way. Tough experience. And, excuse me, gentlemen. Tough experience, but absolutely valuable. She would leave. I would go, and there was a track at the prison, and I would walk the track for an hour, absorbing what she had said to me. And based on that ongoing truth that she told me, I was able to start to evolve, to transform. And I worked hard at it after that. I have a flock. I tell every leader needs a flock of fools. I have 3 people in my life that I trust and respect, and that who care enough about me to tell me the truth. And I rely upon them because I am a terrible judgment of so many things, that I rely upon them to help me. And they do. So I've taken that role, and I said, if I'm going to be a coach, I'm not going to be the traditional coach. I'm going to take my skill set, and I'm going to become a leader's fool. But of course, you've got to want that, because if you don't want the unadulterated truth, you don't want to have me as your coach, because we're gonna have those serious discussions about what you tell me you want to do. You get to tell me what you want to accomplish, and then we're going to accomplish it. And if you tell me that you've stopped, you don't want to do it, we have a problem. And let me tell you that I also believe that every coach needs to put their skin in the game. 50% of my compensation is based on outcome. We do a 360-degree review at the beginning of the process with their management team. And at the end of that 12 months, I only do a 12-month contract. At the end of the 12 months, we do that again. And if we have not accomplished a change that is reflected in that 360, 50% of my compensation is at risk. Skin in the game. That makes me effective. It also makes me direct, to the point. When you're not doing what you've agreed to do as a leader, in our action plan, we always put together an action plan. If you're not doing what you said you were going to do, then we have a problem, because you're now impacting me, not just as your coach, but as your business partner. So that was my transformative journey. When I got out, couldn't practice law anymore. That was the best profession ever for me. I love being a trial lawyer, right? It was taking the jury on a journey. And I called it the hero's journey, because I represented my client. And that journey to me was telling the story, often of someone who had failed and was now going to be punished for that failure. And it was up to them to make that determination about what that punishment was going to be. And I wanted to take them on that journey so that they understood my client and who they really were. And that's a part of storytelling, right? And I believe that's important for leaders also. Every leader is on a journey, hopefully a hero's journey. They should be. Their impact on themselves, on their families, on their friends, and also on their employees and partners is a part of that journey. And so that the concept of being a storyteller as a leader is essential if you're going to be able to continue to have people join you on that journey, support you on that journey.
I apologize for getting the part of the story wrong that your family had left you. It sounds like your wife was quite supportive. What are the types of things that she told you about yourself that revealed some blind spots?
She was very clear about the fact that I was a narcissist. I believed I was the smartest guy in every room. Therefore, if you were to challenge me in any way on my opinion, my decision, my immediate knee-jerk reaction was very abrupt. Again, I was a trial lawyer, so I was built for argument and confrontation. And I would turn a simple issue into a confrontation. And she was real clear about that I was a terrible listener. I was all about expressing my opinion and not listening to anybody else's. So we listed all of those faults that I had and by the way, I have so many blind spots, a lot of blind spots. Those blind spots have developed because of our upbringing to some degree. And they're there with us, and I was easily triggered. My blind spots were I craved acceptance. I wanted to belong. I grew up in a broken home, and I wanted to belong. I wanted stability. And someone who would offer me that opportunity to be a part of the group, I would take that as belonging, and therefore I would be more than happy to do whatever it took to remain a part of the group. So she was very clear about my inability to associate properly with people, that I always gravitated towards the person that she thought was a bad influence. She's my true north. I rely on her to look at relationships that I'm in and make the determination as to whether or not they're beneficial for me. Because I recognize my blind spots. I know them a lot better than I ever have, but they still exist. And if someone's a good manipulator, because I've got a pretty good BS antenna, but someone who's a good manipulator knows exactly what buttons to push. She made me very much aware of what my buttons were, that what I needed, and if someone gave it to me, I was more than happy to reciprocate by doing things that I shouldn't do.
What are a couple of common blind spots that when you're working with an entrepreneur, you find yourself pretty consistently saying to them that they need the jolt of no BS as an entrepreneur? What are a couple of those blind spots you find?
One is the failure to listen to let's start with the beginning. The failure to ask for feedback. We often believe we've made a decision. And by the way, a lot of entrepreneurs believe that they have to appear to be infallible because they're doing things that may be out of the ordinary and people may be questioning them. So they immediately decide the only way I can continue to move forward is not to accept that I can be making a mistake. So I have to appear to be infallible because that's the only way people are going to follow me. So what they do is they not only don't ask for feedback, they actively are opposed to it. And everyone immediately knows if you don't want to hear what they have to say. We are in every conversation, people are looking at you to determine whether or not they can have an opinion as an entrepreneur. Right? If you're their employee. And by the way, we very quickly determine, I know that Paul doesn't want to hear what I have to say, even though he keeps giving it lip service. But whenever I give him my opinion, he immediately has an adverse reaction. And by the way, he never does anything other than what he said he was going to do. You know what happens? People go, no reason to go through that terrible experience. Just let him fall on his butt. So that's the number one thing, is that entrepreneurs have this facade that they put on of infallibility that creates a distance between them and those people they need to hear from.
So it seems to me, though, even starting the conversation when you start talking about the king and the motley fool, and to a certain degree, I think what you're saying here is that a lot of entrepreneurs think they're king. They think that anything that goes against their belief, right, from our history is just not acceptable, and the person doesn't know what they're talking about. And that vulnerability to open yourself up to not being right all the time and hearing what your team has to say is a big number one opportunity. And I love that. So thanks for sharing that. I'd hate to not ask what number 2 and number 3 is if that's number 1. So let me start there with my question.
So yeah, that is number 1. The second thing is that you do have to get outside of your echo chamber, right? Because even if you're willing to accept feedback, if you're not stepping outside of that echo chamber and seeking out a diversity of opinion, you may very well find that all you're getting is the echo of you back. So you've got to take that opportunity to step outside your group. And that's difficult because it's a comfort zone thing, right? We've established our team. We really feel comfortable. We're making a lot of progress. I wonder if we're as good as we think we are. Because think about some of the companies that have failed. Uber, that frat boy environment that the leader encouraged and was comfortable with and hired people who fit within that was destructive, but the culture had suddenly become that. Right? So you didn't see anything else. You didn't see the sexual harassment. You didn't see the aberrant behavior. You've got to make a conscious effort to step outside your comfort zone and your group and seek out diversity of opinion. And by the way, that's where a good coach or a mentor comes into play, right? Because they will provide you with an outside perspective because, again, they're not part of your group. They're this outsider who has an objective perspective that they're willing to share with you. So that's the second thing is break the echo chamber.
Okay, you gotta keep going. You're gonna give me the third one because those two are really good. And it's okay if it's okay if you want to stop at two, and those are the two most important. But I'm just gonna ask if there's a third one.
And the third one is to recognize that you have to be evolving. The concept of being on a leadership journey, we often don't recognize that each segment of this journey has got to then have a transition period. And the transition period is, are you going to move out of your comfort zone in how you do what you do? I keep talking about comfort zones because we get locked in, right? The status quo was only the status quo when it was created. You have to constantly break the status quo. Why? It changes. The status quo is something that people are invested in, right? Because I helped put it together. As an entrepreneur, I put this together. Are you willing to accept that the situation has changed? Therefore, the status quo is no longer relevant. Hard for entrepreneurs. This is what made me successful. How dare you tell me it's not working? I can tell you this isn't working. It needs to change. That's number three. Constantly challenging the status quo is hard. It's essential because, by the way, the pandemic has changed everything. I truly believe that. It has changed how people look at work. Think about this. In the pandemic, you went to work not knowing if it was going to kill you. I mean, seriously, essential workers went to work not knowing if they were going to be alive. So obviously, the psychology about work has been changed forever, I think. There was no reaction pre-pandemic. So for an entrepreneur to not be willing to accept that we are now continuing to evolve and change is essential for evolution, got to be willing to break the status quo. Periodically, just open it up, break it. Do you get the good parts? Yeah. But first you have to examine the status quo to determine what the good parts are.
Got it. So to recap, one, be vulnerable, right? Don't be the king. Don't think that you're invincible and all your decisions are the right decisions, right? Bring some motley fools around you. If not, consider your whole team a motley fool. And number two, get outside of your echo chamber. You need diversity. You need to get out of your closed loop. Get out of the people that give you all the information. Be curious. Go out there and see what's going on in the world. And three, get out of your comfort zone and break the status quo. Rich, this conversation somewhat reminds me, I'd love to share this with you, Paul. We had a podcast episode with Shanna Francesca. She was one of our top podcast episodes of 2023. And in that conversation, Rich and I came up with a formula. And the formula was for intentional leadership growth. Here's the formula. It was be curious plus be open, in parentheses, multiplied by be respectful. And that was the intentional leadership growth formula. If you want to grow as a leader, be curious, be open, and be respectful. And we all connected on that. Yes, that's the formula. And that's really what a lot of what you're talking about today is if leaders just did that, just were open and curious and respectful of thoughts and opinions that were brought to them and not just shutting things down because they thought they knew what it was, it would really help them grow. How do you feel about that formula?
First, absolutely. Let me throw my own ad into here. I actually do a course on, I call it the 4 A's. The 4 A's are attraction, attention, appreciation, and application. Attraction is exactly what you just said. It is being authentic. It's being vulnerable. It's being perpetually curious. right? And open to feedback, creating psychological safety. Google has shown that psychological safety is the basis for high performance of a team. So that attraction aspect, if you're going to be a leader, and I'm not talking about physical attraction, I'm talking about the attraction based off of your ability to interact with those authenticity. By the way, authenticity is the word of 2024. So authenticity, vulnerability, psychological safety, perpetual curiosity. I love empathy. What I like more is compassion. Empathy is I can empathize. I see your problem. Compassion is I'm going to do something about it. See, we get the first part of empathy, but as a leader, you should now say, can I do something to help you? And if I can, that's a response to that empathetic aspect that is compassion. So attraction. The second thing is attention. People crave attention. I do. I crave attention. Everyone needs attention. Leaders have to be present, right? And they have to pay attention. You have to be, I call it executive presence. Everybody's heard the words. You actually have to be there and engage. And you have to engage with people in a different way. Pre-pandemic, it was a transactional engagement between leaders and everybody else. That doesn't work anymore. I don't care. I'm not coin operated. I'm a human being. Transaction is coin operated. Post-pandemic, you know what the followers, the team members are saying? You better interact with me on a relationship basis. That's what I crave. And attention is engaging in a meaningful interaction about our relationship. Not that money isn't important, of course it is, but that's not what people want anymore as a member of a high-performing team. Then we have appreciation. Okay. How about we actually say thank you? By the way, the pre-pandemic, I give them a paycheck. That's showing appreciation. No, that's not. That's saying I'm paid you for your time. What I want as appreciation is for you to recognize that I'm doing what you want me to do. I am meeting your expectations. Tell me you appreciate that. The more often you do that, the better our relationship becomes. Google, and I'm a Google researcher, Gallup says that you need that type of relationship once a week. You need that relationship as a leader with your key people once a week. You need to tell them that you're paying attention to them. You need to show them that you're vulnerable, and you need to say thank you. Why wouldn't you do that? I often found it interesting. During the pandemic, I would have coaching sessions, obviously remote. And at the end of the week, I'd talk to a leader. I'd say, so how'd the week go? It went fine. I said, so did you tell everybody thank you? They came to work. They did what you want. These are absurdly difficult circumstances. And they said, no. I said, well, what'd you tell them? I'll see you next week. I said, well, that's like an invitation back to hell. We had a terrible week, a pandemic. Oh, I'll see you on Monday. It's like, oh, let me go home and drink. Instead of saying, hey, thank you so much for being here with me on this journey every week. And everybody goes, isn't that too much? Are you kidding me? How could that be too? How we say, if we're in a restaurant and someone gives it, we say, can I have a shaker of salt? They hand it to us. We go, thank you. Oh my God, we'll do that for a shaker of salt. But someone who's put 40 hours a week in, we're not going to say thank you? Are you insane? Anyway, that to me goes along with what you just said. The last one is application. Do it. Do it every day, do it every week, do it. The 4 A's to me is how you lead in post-pandemic America. And what you just said as the formula, that fits right into my format.
Love that, Paul. I really appreciate you sharing those 4 A's. Those really resonate with me and with the whole conversation we're having, right? Attraction, attention, appreciation, application, and then the word of 2024, which could be the 4th A or 5th A maybe, authenticity. I really love that. And I truly believe that. I think that leaders are quickly learning in this post-pandemic world, but that you have to lead differently. And people aren't just going to come for the paycheck. They want a lot more from the business, the mission, the vision. They want to be part of something special. And if they don't feel special, it doesn't matter. They're going to go seek something else in this world. And I think that's something that hit a lot of people in the pandemic, right? Is what am I doing? Am I doing something that inspires me and excites me and makes me feel appreciated? And so I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I wanted to come back to something way earlier in the conversation that we never talk about. And I had a very similar experience, I think, than you. And there's a book that I had to read subsequent to a massive failure that I had. And it was part of my trying to figure out what happened. It was part of my fantasy revenge as well. To how could this happen to me and who did this to me? And I want revenge. But the book was called it's called Snakes in Suits: How
Yeah,
Psychopaths Infiltrate the Workplace and Take Advantage of the People and Culture to Their Advantage. And that's something that happened to me. The company I co-founded, built for 15 years, brought on a couple of people, but one in particular that really tore the company up from the inside out, including me. And I fell victim to the con, so to speak, and to the manipulation and to everything else. And it was like, that will never happen to me. Like that will never happen to me, kind of situation. And sure enough, it happened to me. It sounds like it happened to you as well, in a way. What do leaders and entrepreneurs need to do to be careful of protecting themselves and their businesses from those who may come in and destroy the company from the inside out?
first, I believe in group hiring. If you hire as an individual, you will make a mistake at least 50% of the time, if not more. Why? Because if the person wants the job, I've got 4 granddaughters, so I know the lyrics to every Taylor Swift song. One, though, that I use all the time is, I'm a nightmare dressed like a daydream. That to me is what you just described. So here I am. I need this person as a meaningful member of my team. And I sat down with them, and of course, and you mentioned the con. Yeah, the grip. It's all there. I hung out with those guys, and they knew exactly what to say to make you want to be with them, to associate with them, to hire them. Individually, I would always make the bad decision. And I believe most leaders do. Why? They want to hear what you're saying, so they accept it as truth. You need to have a group around you of trusted advisors, your fools maybe, that participate in this process so that they get to filter the BS, the garbage that this person is putting out, trying to convince you to hire them. That to me gives you some protection, because we're all susceptible. Like I said, good con guys figure out your blind spots in a heartbeat. That's their job. And once they know what it is, they feed it. No, it sounds like that's what you went. That's what I went through. That's what most leaders do when they hire inappropriately. The person managed to figure out to tell them what they wanted to hear. So I believe you need that group with you that gives you the protective shield. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. When I think about the NFL getting ready, the Bears have the #1 draft. And of course, we're going to screw it up because we're going to bear it. But the deal is, every team spends millions of dollars on the draft. And they're going to draft the guy that's going to be a generational talent. 50% of all draftees don't make it to their second contract. This is the NFL. That's the most sophisticated process of filtering out those poor performers, make the mistake 50% of the time. So as a leader, accept that you're not really good at this, because most are not. So give yourself protection. Get your group around you that you trust, that you respect, and let them be engaged in the process. And pay attention to what they have to say. It's not, by the way, the leader always gets to it's not a democracy. It's not a vote. Hear the opinions and then make the determination. The second thing is, be prepared to correct a mistake. We live with it. Why? Being infallible. If I made the choice and the choice isn't working and I get rid of the choice, everybody looks at me and goes, what an idiot. No. You know what they think when you don't? They think, what an idiot. They're just not saying it out loud. By the way, whenever you I call them the working dead. When you get rid of one of the working dead, The people that are toxic and for a variety of reasons and are detrimental to the organization and the team, and they spread that, by the way, they have toxicity. When you finally get rid of them, you know what the good people say, the committed, they go, what took you so long? Yeah, exactly. What took you so long? So be quick to correct the mistake.
Yep.
Don't live with it. Yeah.
Paul, I've got a no BS question for you.
Sure.
You said earlier, the pandemic changed everything. Psychology about work has changed forever. Your book, WorkQuake, was published September 26th, 2012. Is your book still relevant since psychology about work has changed forever?
Oh, hell yeah. My book, I told my editor when they published this, I said, no one's going to buy this book. He was like, it's a good book. I said, nobody's ready for this message. No one wants to hear this. Leaders don't want to hear this. They'll give it lip service, but there's no one going to say, this is what I need. This is how I need to run my company. No, it was prescient. I'll claim credit. The book is more relevant today than it was in 2012 because leaders are forced to be more open to the concepts. They weren't, it was lip service. I love it. 2019, the Business Roundtable, 200 of the most valuable companies in the United States, they issue a proclamation. We are going to be more concerned and caring about the welfare of our employees. Now, this is immediately before the pandemic. You think they lived up to that statement when the crisis suddenly appeared where you could apply that? Hell no. They did not. Now there is a understanding of what it's going to take. If you want to look, every leader, every organization talks to me about two things. How do I get more engagement and how do I get retention? All right? Why? Turnover is terrible and it's a killer. Turnover kills a company more than anything else. The level of engagement, once again, back to Gallup, only 28% of your workforce is committed. 60%, we've actually got a new title for them. We call them the quiet quitters, right? They're the ones that are doing just enough not to get fired. Then we've got the toxic group, right? The 18%, I'm not sure my math is right now, but the 18% that are disengaged and toxic, they're the ones I call the working dead. Every organization says, that's not me until I say, listen, let me sit down with your management team and they will point out the working dead in a heartbeat. Why are they keeping them? Because they're afraid they can't replace them. We kept them during the pandemic because, oh my God, how dare we fire someone? We can't hire anyone. What do you think causes your turnover? So when we start talking about those two things, engagement and retention, I can tell them immediately, use the 4 A's and you will improve engagement and retention. Why? You're starting to have a different interaction with your group. If you're going to try to treat them transactionally like we did before the pandemic, don't expect it to get any better. It won't. That's the deal. So yes, my book is absolutely should be a bestseller. Not that it will be.
Tell me about psychological safety. You had said that is the basis for a high-performing team. How does a leader create psychological safety? What are the do's and don'ts of developing psychological safety?
First, you better want it. If you don't want it, don't pretend you do. By the way, we keep talking about BS. There are no dumb people in the workplace anymore. They may act dumb, they're not dumb. They've been exposed to so much BS in their life, they can identify it spot on. If you say, I want something, they are watching you to determine, do you mean it? Authenticity. You can taste it, you can see it, you can feel it. You can also feel when it's not there and someone's doing lip service. So if you want if you want what you're going to get from psychological safety, which is truth to power, you better want it. Then you better set the stage for it. And once again, Everybody says, when I start talking about this, say, we already have that here. My employees tell me the truth. Your employees are afraid of you. They don't want to talk to you because they don't know how you're going to react when they tell you something you don't want to hear. When you ball up your fist and your neck gets tight, that's a signal not to say anything to you that's going to do that. So what do? First, you start by saying, I understand that I have blind spots. How about you accept your proclivities for not being good? You accept the fact you're not infallible, and you tell people that. Hey, you're part of my team. I respect you. I trust you. I want you to do that for me. But I have to make sure you do that. Now, by the way, the first thing that I always start off with is the 360-degree review. Because it's anonymous. It comes through me. So when I get this information, I'm going to give it to you as a leader. And I guarantee you're not going to like it. The best thing is when I do, there's a section of my 360 based on communication. Every leader believes they're fantastic. You know what the results are? He communicates by telepathy. He believes if he says it, we should hear it. They're like, that can't be true. Absolutely. You're terrible. You give muddled messages. Your expectations are not clear. You'll blow up when somebody does something good or bad. Tell me something. They don't know what you want because you don't know how to tell them. How about we work on communication? See, that's always how we get to start this conversation. And they don't believe it. I'll give you the extreme example. I had a guy call me, $60 million company. He'd been referred. It looked like we were going to be a fit. And I said, we're going to do the 360. Absolutely. He's got an 8-person management team. I send it out, get the results back. I put the results, summation results, send it to him, and he's shocked. Oh my God, because the nice thing about the 360 is if it's anonymous, you really start to get some truth, right? And he's shocked by it. And he says, I need to think about this. Of course. A week later, he calls me, he goes, let's do the 360 again. I'm like, why? He said, really, let's just do it. I said, no, the deal is we'll do the 360 in 12 months, right? Got to go through the coaching process. He said, no, I want to do it now. I said, okay, you need to explain to me why we should do this. He said, I got my management team together, and I said, we're going to do this until we get it right. Hey, by the way, I said, you're too stupid for me to coach. And that was the end of the conversation. Never talked to him again. See, that's saying I want something but not meaning it. Once you say you mean it, you now go out and you go, I am not infallible. I make mistakes. And I need you to help me avoid repeating those mistakes. But if I don't know I made it, I'll make it again. Help me. And you set that up. And then you know what you do? You start communicating on a different level. Whenever I get a company that's got a third shift, one of the things I ask the leader is, when was the last time you were on the third shift? Crickets. Why? The third shift's midnight. I'm in bed. By the way, and then I like to be real sarcastic just because I enjoy it. I said, so these aren't employees of yours, right? What do you mean? They're a different company? You subcontracted? Oh, okay. Then maybe you should act like they're your employees and you should go visit them. And I said, by the way, don't tell them you're coming. Get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, lunch breaks at 4, go there. Said, the first time you show up, they're going to call the police. He said, what do you mean? You're an intruder. They don't know who you are, right? Who just showed up in the cafeteria? Oh my God. Said, the third time, and by the way, don't let your supervisors come into the cafeteria with you. Sit down at the table with employees. Introduce yourself. Ask their opinion about things on the third shift, because that's where the action is, by the way. The third shift has the least amount of supervision, and the supervisor is the king, right? Because nobody else is there but him. You want overtime? That's the guy that's going to give it to you or not. You want the better job? That's the guy. Guess what? That's usually a very toxic situation. I said, look, the third time you sit down, show up, the people you're sitting there with in the cafeteria are going to start to believe you mean it. That's when you get truth. Now, up till then, they're still trying to figure out, is this just a joke? Is this a trap? That's what you have to do. You have to leave your office and get out amongst the people who do the work because they know what the problems are and they know what mistakes are being made. Don't trust your leadership team to tell you the truth. They are a filter for the truth. Go to the front line and watch, engage. That's how you start to develop psychological safety. Then when you say, give it to me, and they do, you better do something about the information. Because if you don't, they'll never give it to you again. Why would they? They've opened themselves up. They've shared with you. And by the way, it's just not comfortable for employees. They've been taught not to say anything, to shut up. You're now asking them to do something that's uncomfortable. When they do that for you, when they give you the gift of truth, honor it. Do something about it. Not only empathize, but be compassionate. Change something that benefits them. That's when they now say, this guy's for real. The psychological safety has been developed, but it is fragile. It is fragile. And you can't allow anyone else in the organization to get between you and the truth because they may try. If there's a leader who has been especially toxic and you don't know about it, he's afraid of you hearing that truth. Got to go around them. They hate it. How dare, why can't we do this together? Because I have no idea if they trust you enough to talk to me openly. And you're the guy that may be generating, or woman who may be generating the issues that we have to deal with. So I'm taking you out of that process. And by the way, if you've got difficulty with it, that's usually a warning sign that you're a problem. That's just no BS.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. And yeah, I've got a number of notes. You better want it. Let people know I understand I have blind spots. I need you to help me to avoid repeating my own mistakes. You got to show up consistently and then ultimately do something about the feedback that you get to close that loop. If people want to get in touch with you, how would you like them to do that?
They can contact me on LinkedIn at Paul Glover Coaching, or they can contact me directly at paul@paulglovercoaching.com.
Thank you for joining us today and giving us No BS.
It's been a pleasure, both of you. Thank you so much. I always like the opportunity to talk about something I'm passionate about. You gave me the opportunity. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Paul.
You.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, among other things that I got out of the conversation with Paul, I love the be prepared to correct a mistake. I think it's all too often that it just seems easier as a leader to make a decision and follow through on it. Sometimes I can do that. I see entrepreneurs do that. You make a decision and you just follow through on it, even in the midst of getting information back that says maybe that decision wasn't the right one. And the way he talked about everybody knows it's a wrong one, then they're waiting for you to reverse course. They don't think that you're dumb because you contradict yourself and reverse course. They actually think you're dumb when you're not. And they actually celebrate when you see a decision you made didn't work and you're ready to correct your mistake. That was one of the things that I highlighted.
Yeah, certainly beyond the group hiring and bringing your trusted advisors in to help you make this top draft pick that you're going to be bringing into your organization that might be there 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Bring people around you, surround yourself with your trusted advisor to help make this pick. But that goes along the theory, Rich, that you just talked about, which is hire slow, fire fast. If it's not working, cut it, just get rid of it, eliminate it. But that goes the same way with other big decisions your business makes. Do the proper analysis, take your time. Don't be chasing shiny objects, do it properly. But if it's not working, cut it fast. And it's almost like when you and I go to the blackjack tables, right? If you lose your first 3 hands, get off the table and go somewhere else. Don't just stay there going, oh, this table's going to turn and it's going to get hot at some point when you're on this losing streak. Get out of there. And it's the same thing applies to business and entrepreneurs. You have to be ready to make those moves, but you can't do it if your team's afraid to tell you the truth. which I think is a big piece of this conversation we had today. The word of 2024 is authenticity. The word of 2023 was probably vulnerability. Like, you have to be open to knowing that every decision you make may not be the right one. And that's okay. Bring some motley fools. Have your whole team be motley fools if you need to. I love that analysis.
I like where we ended on the psychological safety. And, we've had several guests on where we've asked them, what is your definition of something? And then we'll get this concise definition of things. I think we got one of those nuggets from Paul on, if somebody said, what's psychological safety? It's truth to power. It's someone who's not in the power position who feels comfortable speaking truth to someone who is in a power position.
Yeah.
And again, just the recap from him on, if you're going to say that you want it, you better actually want it, because people are going to tell you things that may be in your blind spots that aren't going to be flattering, that you're then going to have to do something about in order to perpetuate getting that feedback. Because if you don't do something with it, why would somebody give you feedback again? And letting people know, look, I make mistakes. I'm not always aware of them. I'd like to not repeat my mistakes. Can you help me? There's this, what he talked about was really a partnering aspect of going to someone and saying, I'd like you to have my back and let me know what mistakes I'm making so I don't make them again.
Yeah. You know what I think the biggest secret is to create authentic leadership and to be an authentic leader? It's really being curious. It goes back to that conversation with Shauna. Like, you just have to be curious. Don't come to every meeting with your position and your answer. Come to every meeting with, what do you guys all think? Get the group think going, and then form your opinion based on all the input from all the data points that you're getting from your trusted team and advisors, and just be curious. And I think it's a major problem with society, even, Rich. Like, we're not curious to hear the other side, to hear the other opinion. We just go in with, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. And if it's anything against our opinion, we think it's bad. And I think it's a big problem with our society. It's a big problem with entrepreneurs. So this whole concept of just being curious, always being curious about how people are receiving you, be curious about how you're making decisions in the business and decisions you have to make. Just be curious, and that will create the authenticity that you really need.
Among other notes that I took, about halfway through the conversation, I did take a note that said perpetual curiosity. It was one of the things that he said, and I wrote that down again among many other notes. So it's you pointing that out just makes me want to highlight that perpetual curiosity. As a leader, it gets us on the right side of things. It gets us into asking questions instead of making statements. Believing and knowing that the people who we lead, that collective, has more intelligence than us as an individual. And in order to tap into it, we need to tap into curiosity.